So when we left off, we talked a fair amount about our methods. We'd made some pretty good progress in our deliverables with these tweets and with these users. We've got an instance of a user, two instances of users, in fact, and six instances of tweets hanging out. We've completed the ability to create a new user by passing in a username for that user to have. We've got the ability for those users to post tweets with an instance method called on those instances of users. We pass in a message and a new tweet is created. The way that works is that we call the tweet.new method or class method on the tweet that in turn invokes the initialize method, passing in a message and not just the username, but the whole instance of a user. Those two are kept around in instance variables, and the user then has this variable which is set to a new instance of a tweet. And this all, if I remember correctly, works just fine. Runner.rb. Yeah, despite the normal warnings, tweet 6, for example, has two instance variables. One, @message, is set to the message that we passed in when we posted this tweet. The @user instance variable is set not just to a username, but to a whole instance of a user. In fact, the user that had post tweet called on them. Message passed in, instance of the user that we called post tweet on becomes the user associated with that tweet. And that's thanks to the magic of self. Self is always going to be the user that you called a method on when you're in the context of an instance method. So when you're in the context of an instance method, self is the instance that you called that instance method on, wherever it may be that that method got called. In this case, you're in the runner RB. So if I look at tweet 4, the @user instance variable will be the user instance that we called post tweet on for tweet 4. Coffee Dad. Questions to hear? Feel free to throw them in the chat or unmute yourself and just talk at me. That's fine too, and that would seem to work okay for mod 2. So we want to try that out. That's cool. How do we call @message in tweet 6? Great question. So if we've got tweet 6 here on the command line, getting the @message instance variable is not something that you can necessarily do. It's not automatic that if you have an instance variable like @message, that you can say tweet6.message. But if we say tweet6.message, we do actually get the string message that is the value of @message here. The reason we get it, though, is not just because we have an @message instance variable, it's because we have this reader here for the message. The reader accesses the instance variable and gets you back that value. So let me show you what would happen if we just didn't have that instance variable, but we did have the reader. We get back nil, which is maybe a little bit weird. Instance variables in general start out as nil, kind of like values in a hash. So if we don't define @message to be the string that gets passed in the initialize method, it'll wind up being nil. If, on the other hand, we don't have the reader, but we do have the instance variable, something different will happen. No. Let's try that one more time. Tweet6.message. This is different. We don't get nil. We actually get an error. Undefined method message for tweet. The reader and the instance variable work together to make it work to have an instance method message on an instance of a tweet. You need both. The instance variable holds the value, and the reader allows you to actually call this method and access that value. Yes, it can. Anything in particular you want to see while we do this? Cool. let's do this way. And here's the runner. Let me know if there's ever anything you want to see as we go. All right, Jack, does that answer your question? Awesome. Also, pardon my sniffles. I Googled it, and it's not a symptom of the coronavirus, but I don't know, seasonal allergies, I hope. So, our remaining deliverables are two. I think we did the initialize method, the reader for the username. Post tweet is good. We've got a tweet message. We've got a tweet user. Those are just readers on the user as well. We didn't finish tweet.all and we didn't finish tweet.username, but I'm going to call these done if I can. Drat. Okay. There we go. Boom. Let's first talk about tweet.all. I think tweet.username we can successfully put off for a little bit. I also want to think about this tweets array. That's actually not checked off yet. But I want to talk about tweet.all. We've been accessing individual tweets on the command line like this, tweet 1, tweet 2, and this is just possible because we've got these set to very uninteresting variable names in my runner. What I want to do is actually implement this class method that should return an array of all the tweet instances that have ever been created. Right here, this deliverable. So we've got the instance method defined, the class method defined. If I call tweet.all, I get back nil. Doesn't actually return anything yet. And I want to change that. I want to make sure that it does actually return something. If we're going to return all the tweets created, what data type would be a good choice for the return value of self.all? It's going to have to be a return value that can encompass multiple tweets. What are your thoughts? An array of class instances. I like this. Let's be really specific about what type of class instances we want to put in this array. I like the idea of an array because it's, so my follow-up question to you is, what kind of class instances? Instances of what class? But while you think about that, I'm going to talk about the array. I like the idea of the array because that way we can have anywhere between 0 tweets. If we're at the moment in the runner where we haven't created any tweets yet, we go tweet.all, this would probably return an empty array. At this point, after we've created these 4 tweets, we'll probably have 4 different tweets in that array. And then at this point, we'll have 6. An array can expand or contract to fit all of those needs. So what kind of class, which class do we want instances of in this array? TBD. Everyone, but if you have an answer, I'd love to hear it. Tweets. Yeah, I agree. We'll have an array of tweet instances. Again, not just the message for the tweet, but the whole tweet instance. Something that will look something like this. An instance that includes a message, but also includes the user who created that tweet. We can put a bunch of these instances in an array, and yeah, it's going to look a little complicated on the console here. But that way we can see any information about that tweet from the user to the message to anything we add in the future. I like it. All right. Take a look at what I just did to our tweet class. Does anyone know what kind of variable this is? Global is a good guess, but it's actually not a global variable. Global variables look like this. That's the joke. Global variables start with a dollar sign. No, no, no. You're not to blame. I promise. Uh, no, this is a different kind of variable. Anyone have another thought? We've seen local variables. We've seen global variables. We've seen what was the other one? Instance variables. Class scoped global variable. I like that. That's actually a pretty good description of what this is, but there's a simpler word for it, and it's simply a class variable. So instance variables stick to the instance that they're associated with. Each individual tweet has its own value in this @message instance variable. This one has a drinking coffee string in its message variable. This one has a having coffee string in its message variable. Each instance has its own value for that same instance variable. This kind of variable is a class variable, and each class contains its class variables. That is, this variable is shared and appears one time in the whole class tweet. Any of the instances could access this same class variable. It's scoped to the class. We couldn't get from the user class to this class variable in tweet. It's sort of stuck to the tweet class itself. There's only one copy of it for the whole tweet class. Kind of like the way that we call .all on the tweet class when it's a class method. This class variable is meant, any class variable is meant for information that pertains to the whole class. Yeah, it's just for the class. That's why we call it a class variable. But it works a little bit differently in scope and identity than an instance variable. And syntactically, you'll know it's a class variable by the fact that it has two @ signs in front of it. Questions about class variables? All right, bring them to me if you have them. Can we access a global class variable within another class with a reader? I think there is a way to do something similar to add a reader. I don't remember what it is with class variables. What I've actually done here is basically created a reader for that class variable. Self.all, this class method, is a reader for that class variable. Tweet.all will give me back the value of that class variable. And if I wanted to, in user for some reason, go and look at all of the tweets, this would work, yes. Similar to the way that we write getters for instance variables, this gets the value of a class variable and exposes it to the rest of our application. Yeah, it is pretty sweet. Yeah, so what's the value of this class variable that I got back when I called tweet.all? We've got an empty array, which is a good start. We want this method to return all of the tweets created. Currently, it's returning an empty array. We want it to return an array of tweets, but an empty array is probably a good start. If we can just get tweets into this array, we'll be done. And that's what we're going to do after we address this. Why do we need the self in front of .all? Great question. Let's take it out and see what happens. We got an undefined method all for tweet class in this case. Does anyone know why we now have an undefined method all for tweet class? The method's still defined right here on line 12, but now I can't call it on the tweet class. Kind of. Doesn't know what class it's referring to. It's not quite that it doesn't know what class it isn't referring to. User.all also won't work. Add all isn't assigned. It actually is assigned here. We haven't actually changed anything about that. So add all is still inside the tweet class. I don't actually know how to see it on the console, but add it all is still there. We've actually just changed something about the definition of this method. It used to be self.all, now it's .all, and we can't call tweet.all anymore, which we used to be able to do and get back that value of add@all. How about this? I'm going to grab an instance of a tweet, tweet6. If I call tweet6.all, look what I get now. Curiouser and curiouser. It only works when we call it on an instance now. .all is what we call an instance method. And it's an instance method because it doesn't have self dot in front of it. It won't work when we call it on a class because it is not a class method anymore. It's an instance method. Self dot in front of the method name makes something a class method. If we don't have that self dot, it'll just be an instance method. And this works fine, still gives us the empty array. What I don't want to have happen is for me to need access to one instance of a tweet in order to see all of the tweets, because that just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. I want to just be able to say, hey, tweet.all from another class or from anywhere in my application, and just call that on the class. The list of all tweets is something about the tweet class as a whole, and I don't want to have a dependency on having access to a single tweet in order to call that method. So I think it makes more sense to have .all be a class method. It only works for an instance of self. We don't have to call a particular instance. The self bypasses the initialize method. I think you could say that. Self in this case refers to the tweet class. I know in other cases self refers to an instance of a tweet or an instance of a user, depending on the context. What I'm doing here is a shorthand for def tweet.all. For complicated reasons, self on line 12 is the class tweet and not the instance, and it's just a shorter way of saying this. That means that if I want to change this to a different class name, I don't have to do it in a lot of different places. So user can call user.all. Not yet. We could make that work. We could set up def self.all in user and have that return something. But until we actually write that method, until we write a class method on user, that won't work. So let's talk a little bit more about self, because that's going to become really important as we go here. I'm going to run my runner again, and we're probably going to hit this binding pry on line 13 first, then we'll hit the one on line 8 every time a new tweet is initialized. How many times will this binding pry on line 8 probably get hit? Why 6, Donnie? Yeah, specifically, every time I create an instance. Post tweet, post tweet, post tweet, post tweet, post tweet. Each time we post a tweet, we call tweet.new. Each time we call tweet.new, tweet.initialize runs. And we do this 6 times, so this code will run 6 times, so this code will run 6 times. It's a lot of context switching. For all of you with ADHD, this will be a little bit easier than for everyone else, and I feel you. It's kind of a superpower in this context. Why would we hit the binding pry on 13 first? Great question. So line 13 runs before we actually go to initializing any of these. It runs when we require relative tweet. When we require relative tweet, it'll load the tweet class, look at all these methods, kind of like tack them on to the tweet class. And line 13, because it's outside of a method, will run before any of these other methods get called. It's in the phase where we're actually creating the tweet class itself. Then later we're using the tweet class to create instances and stuff like that. But Ruby actually evaluates the tweet class first. So we're hitting our binding pry on line 13 here. We're in a different phase where we're actually like deciding and telling Ruby about what the tweet class looks like. What I want to do is I want to look at what the value of self is here. want to look at the value of self here on line 13 because it's the same value of self that we'll see on line 15 when we attach this class method .all to whatever it is that self is. All right. Let's do a poll. Signy just did this. Oh no. Oh, this is going to be a pain, isn't it? I'm already bought in. Okay, let's do it. What will self be on line 13? Single choice, let's do those are probably good options. Let's save it and can I set a time limit for this? I'm not going to worry about it. Let's launch the poll. If you cannot see the poll, let me know. Ooh, okay, people are voting. That's a good sign. We're having very low voter turnout, and I want to just remind you that while you don't have to vote in this poll, there is literally no penalty for being wrong. And in fact, if you take a guess at this, even if you are wrong, knowing the answer after you take this guess, you will remember the answer even better for having guessed. I know. It is not always easy to take the leap and give an answer that might be wrong, but I can promise you, having done it many, many times, sometimes in front of a room full of 30 people, I have not yet suffered any horrible ill effects physically. It's better for you than coronavirus. All right, so we've got a good spread of answers. Oh, thank you, Sylvia. 5 people think it's the tweet class. 2 people think it's an instance of a tweet, and 1 person thinks that it's going to be nil. I think any of these are reasonable answers. We haven't really, there's no good reason for self to have a value here on line 13, so I could see it being nil. Maybe it's not really a useful concept on line 13. For those of you who said it was an instance of a tweet, I see your logic there. Previously, when we were working in specific instance methods, the self value was an instance of the class that we called the instance method on. So in this context, it's absolutely going to be an instance of a user. For those of you who say the tweet class, this is something we haven't really seen before, but you're also right. It is, in fact, the tweet class. Self is weird. Self keeps changing value, and you have to look at the context of self in order to understand what it's going to be. In this context on line 13, right here on line 15, self is the whole tweet class, not an instance of a tweet, but the whole tweet class. And that's how we attach this .all class method to the class, by referring to the class with the keyword self. Does that make sense? How are we feeling? All right, thank you all for voting. Yes, I can explain. But what? Why, the reason I put the instance of the class as the option is that in other contexts, self will be the instance of the tweet. So if I exit from this pry, I'll pop up to my initialize method. I'll be on line 8. In this context, take a look at what self is. How would you describe this? Yeah, this is why it would be confusing. Sometimes self is an instance of a tweet. Sometimes self is the class tweet. You have to look at the context to understand which one it's going to be. In this case, we're in an instance method, initialize. In this case, we're not in an instance method. We're sort of out in the rest of it. We're actually creating a class method, so it's the class. Here's the rule with self, and I'll just type it into the chat. If you are in an instance method, that's it, 2 rules. If you are in an instance method, self will be the instance you called the method on. In our user class, self will be the instance that you called post tweet on. Otherwise, anywhere else, self will be the class you are in. Self here is the tweet class. 2 rules. And they're not necessarily the most intuitive, but those are the only 2. All right. So here we are in initialize in tweet. We have access to self. Self is an instance of a tweet. And it's in fact the instance of the tweet that we are currently in the process of creating right here. And technically, right here. What's interesting about this fact is that I've got add all at my disposal as well. Add all, if you remember, is the class variable that we set up to hold all of the tweets. What would you think about me taking add all, the array, in the class variable, and shoveling self into it? I hope you like that idea, because I'm going to do it. And add all is going to do what arrays do when you shovel things into them. What is add all full of now? It's got an instance in it. It's not actually the class. Careful with this readout. It does say the name of the class right here, but I want you to again look at context. If you see the hashtag, the angle bracket, the class name, a colon, and then the object ID, and then another angle bracket, this is not the class. It is an instance of the tweet class. Not the tweet class, but an instance of the tweet class. Yeah, we've shoveled the instance of the tweet into the array. This is an array of tweet instances. Now, can I call that instance later? Yes. If I have access to the array, that tweet will still be there. Careful with terminology here. It is an instance, but it's not an instance variable. For it to be an instance variable, you'd have to see the @ sign. And this here is a class variable, so it has 2 @ signs. But yeah, this is an instance, even if it's not an instance variable. So the cool thing about this particular binding pry is if I exit, we're going to come around. This time the message is drinking coffee hashtag, so we're now in the process of posting our second tweet. We're also on this line in post tweet, so like this line 9 calls this line 9 in user, calls line 11 with tweet.new, and tweet.new calls initialize, and we're around here in line 8 of tweet. Self, at this point, is a new instance of a tweet. Add all is that same class variable that we shoveled the first tweet into as well. You can see now this tweet has had some instance variables assigned to it. This is the first tweet that says having coffee with the user set to an instance of a user named coffee dad. What would you think if I did the same thing I did before and shoveled self into add all again? Self, as a refresher, is our new instance of a tweet that we are now in the process of creating. Don't like it. Sorry, Donnie, I'm going to do it anyway. So now we've got an array with one instance of a tweet in it and another instance of a tweet in it. Donnie, I'm sorry for picking on you, but I'm gonna do this again. Add all is now an array with 2 tweets in it. Here's the first one. message is having coffee, user is coffee dad. Here's the other tweet, message is drinking coffee, user is coffee dad. And self is another instance of a tweet. And I'm going to shovel that into add all as well, and I'm going to exit again. And then add all is going to be an array with 3 tweets in it. Having coffee, drinking coffee, they must pay for what they have done. So if I shovel self into add all now, just lather, rinse, repeat, exit, add all, having coffee, drinking coffee, they must pay for what they have done, enjoying a cup of coffee. Donnie, tell me what you don't like about this. Actually, nothing. Okay. Did I sell you on it, or did I just wear you down by continuing to do it? Also, other folks, do you like this? Do you understand what's going on? Are you cool with this piece of code that I just copied and pasted into my initialize method? What we're saying here, self is an instance of a tweet. We'll shovel each of those instances of a tweet into add all at the moment that we create them. Every time we create a tweet, we'll shovel that newly created tweet, the instance that we can refer to as self here, because we're in an instance method, into the class variable add all. And the amazing thing about this is okay, I think that's probably enough. If I call tweet.all now, we have a beautiful, beautiful array of tweets. Tweet, 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 enjoying a cup of coffee, your mom, coronavirus is no excuse for racism. This is an array with, I think, and I hope, 6 tweets in it. Unless I did something wrong. Yeah. I have implemented self.all using a class variable and by shoveling self, the instance of the tweet that we're in the process of creating, into that class variable as we go. I will take believing that you know what's going on. I think that's great. If you believe that you don't know what's going on, I actually especially want to hear from you because you're probably not alone. Okay, tell me about it. Also, I think I want to pivot and actually, when you have a question or something to express, um, unmute yourself and actually talk to me because I think it'll be a little faster than me waiting to read what you've typed. I do like this sentiment. It seems messy to have all users' tweets together. We do have to, at some point, create a method def tweets on user. Our README asks for an instance method tweets that returns an array of tweet instances that we can call on an instance of the user class. I can tell that because of this lovely hashtag here. That means that we are looking for an instance method. This is the method that may feel less messy to you. This method is probably going to be for something like the main feed on Twitter, where you can see just everyone's tweets and whatever everyone is tweeting about right now. Currently, we only have 6 tweets, but if it works for 6, it can work for 600. Arrays are just that good in Ruby. What else do folks have concerns about? Just unmute yourself and talk to me. There are all my tweets. I'm going to do so. This can be a kind of a hard output to read for folks because like there's a lot of angle brackets here. You have to go really slow and see like this is the opening one, that's the ending one. I've got a lot of practice doing this, so I can like eyeball those from a mile away. But this one tweet has an at message with a string, and sorry, I should do this with the mouse. I'm pointing to my screen and no one can see it. This at user right here is an instance that is sort of like trapped inside of the tweet. It's referenced inside of that tweet, but like once you start opening a second set of angle brackets, you can kind of lose track of the outer angle brackets, and that's a mess. So I want to actually create a method that the README doesn't ask for. It's called inspect, and I'm going to have it return a string. And I'm going to make this string look a little bit like the one that I was using before, that this prints out to, but it's going to be a little dumber. I am a tweet is all it's going to say. Take a look at what happens when I rerun tweet.all. Or actually, let me just look at tweet1 now on the console. Ready? Take a look at what I got. So inspect is like a magic word in Ruby. Ruby is going to call this method and use this string to output a tweet on the console whenever it needs to print out that one particular tweet. By default, Ruby classes have an inspect method that will like squirt out the hashtag angle bracket tweet colon object ID, then list all the instance variables string version of that tweet. But I can decide, you know what, I don't want that anymore. It's confusing. I just want tweets to look like this from now on. And this means that not only, no, I don't want to ever save my terminal output. This means that not only can I look at tweet 6, for example, and see, hi, I am a tweet. I can also look at tweet.all, and inside of the array, I get the output, hi, I am a tweet, 6 times with commas in between. So this is less information than I had before, which I don't love, but it's a little easier on the eyes, at least to me. Agreed? Cool. Talk to me about what you do understand with inspect. What are you seeing here? Yep. Mm-hmm. Ruby does it magically. If if Ruby ever is like, okay, I've got a tweet instance, someone just typed in tweet 6, and I need to like print that out to the console, this is the method that Ruby is going to use to turn that whole tweet instance into just a string that we can slap out on the console. I'm trying to think of a good metaphor to use for this. It's sort of like, I don't know. I mean, we're all complete human people, right? With complex feelings and identities and emotions. But on day one, we all wrote out name tags for ourselves. Yeah, we put some name on that name tag. Some of us put our pronouns on there. And that is sort of like a representation to other people of who we are. This is like the name tag of an instance of a tweet for Ruby. Ruby's going to look for this particular name tag and print that thing out on the console if we define this method. If we don't, we'll get the sort of default output that we have maybe gotten somewhat used to. Tweet 6 is going to look like that. Tweet.all is going to be this mess. Yeah. Right. And this doesn't change what the instance is, just like a name tag doesn't change who you are. It just changes the way that the tweet will look on the console. If I run tweet 6, oop, no, let me exit. I would have commented that back in. If that instance method exists, it changes the way that the tweet instance looks on the console. The tweet class looks the same, but this changes how the tweet instance itself looks on the console. Awesome. So what I'm going to do is this. I'm going to actually interpolate the username for the tweet and the message for the tweet. And actually, no, I'm not going to do both of those things. I'm just going to do the message for now. I'm going to interpolate the message of the tweet into this representation. So for tweet 6, it'll look like this. Tweet, coronavirus is no excuse for racism. Tweet 1, no, that's not a 1. Okay, oh no, the backticks. Yikes. Okay. Tweet 1, this one says having coffee. Tweet 2, drinking coffee. This way we can actually see the text of the tweet in our inspect string. Tweet.all is going to look a lot nicer for us. We have a little less information about what's going on in the class, but we at least have a better representation of which tweet is which and how those tweets look. Sound good? We're going to put some quotes around the message just for formatting's sake, and then I'm going to do another little interpolation, self.user.username, so that we can see the username of the account that made these tweets. Using the inspect method, is there no implicit self? No, there is implicit self. I'm just being explicit so that we know that we're actually calling this method on the user reader, and we're calling username on the instance of the user that comes back from the user reader, yikes, just to make it a little more explicit. Is there any reason why inspect has that? Yes, I literally put this hashtag here in the angle brackets just to make it look a little more familiar. You can do whatever you want. Cool. Tweet, NJGov, coronavirus is no excuse for racism. Got extra quotes here. One more time. Tweet 1, tweet 2, tweet 3, tweet 6. I feel pretty good about this. Tweet.all is a little longer, but we can see, okay, tweet from Coffee Dad, tweet from Coffee Dad, tweet from Coffee Dad, tweet from NJGov, NJGov, with the actual text of the tweet. This is a little more concise as a view, and I think that'll help us as we go forward in this. All right. So now that we've got tweet.all working, and we've got a cool inspect method on tweet, I want to take a look at this user.tweets method. When I call coffeedad.tweets, I get back nil currently, which is fine. I've got the method defined. It's a class or an instance method. I should do a poll, but just throw it in the chat. Tweets, class or instance method? Instance, yeah, this is an instance method. You can tell because it doesn't have self in front of it, and because I just called it on, you guessed it, an instance of a user. Coffee Dad. There we go. This is our instance of a user. Our instance of the user has this method tweets, and this should return an array of tweets, but only the tweets that were created by that user. Tweets returns an array of tweet instances, and it doesn't actually say the ones from that user, but I'm going to say that. It should be just the array of tweet instances associated with the user. Anyone have any ideas about how to do this? Feel free to unmute yourself and chime in. Yeah, our goal is to fulfill this deliverable. On the user class, create an instance method tweets that returns an array of tweet instances that the user you called the method on created. I want to break this problem down into maybe some steps or an approach. Tell me about why. Got it. Okay, so when we call this, we're going to call coffeedad.tweets. Is there any way we can get back to the user that we called the method on without passing in that user? Because it's going to be a little bit annoying to go coffeedad.tweets coffeedad. Like, then we have to write coffeedad twice, and that might be a pain. Yeah, I think self might be able to help us out a lot here and might mean that we don't have to pass in that user. We might want to use self for something. Donnie, okay, I like this idea. Maybe call add@all and use an enumerable to select users' tweets. I think that's a really good idea. We won't be able to directly call add@all in tweet because it's a class variable in a class that we are not in here. In user, we can't access the class variables of another class. But there is a way of accessing the value of add@all from the user class, even if the add@all is in the tweet class. No, that will give us the last element of that array. If we're in a different context, this variable is out of scope. However, if there were just like a method that exposed the value of add@all, we might be in business. Other thoughts? Yeah, if we call self.all here, self is actually going to be an instance of the user class, and we can't actually get to this method. How do we call this method from, for example, the console? We did it before. Just .all? Tweet.all. Thank you, Xavier. Yeah, tweet.all is going to give us all of the tweets. All right, so we start with tweet.all. I'm actually going to run this code already because I think this is a really good start. Tweet.all is an array of tweets. We want this to return an array of tweets. Ruby runner RB, great, cool, coffee, dad.tweets. Imagine yourselves giving a huge, huge drum roll as we do this. No, thank you. That was a drum roll. Look at this beautiful array of tweets. I think I might be done here. Great, it's an array of tweets. You feel good about this? Launch it. Oh gosh, all right, you're just gonna have to tell me in the chat. Yes, we feel good about this. Good. Anyone not feel good about this? No. See. Maybe. So. Tell me about your concerns. Is there something about this method that maybe isn't working the way we expect it to? We want an instance method tweets that returns an array of tweet instances that the user you called the method on created. Ooh, okay. Jersey.tweets is pretty elegant though. I agree. Not returning only the user wanted. Yes. We are not returning the right tweets. We have an array, and we have tweets in the array, but we are not returning the right tweets. If this was working the right way, coffeedad.tweets would give us these 4 tweets, but not these tweets. They're great tweets. They're just not coffeedad's tweets. If this was working correctly, jersey.tweets would have given us these 2 tweets. Not those tweets. These 2 tweets, but not these 4 tweets. We're going to need to do some more work to not just return an array of tweets, but also an array of the right tweets. Before we do that, though, we've been here a minute. Let's take a quick break and come back. All right, welcome back, if you are back. Sylvia's smiling, and so I'm assuming that means she can hear me at least. Should I pin myself so that I can see what weird faces I'm making? No, can't figure out how to do that. Okay, we'll make that go away. Let me know if I'm making a weird face. I don't want to subject you to that. So, when we left off, our problem was when I call coffee.tweets, I get too many tweets. When I call jersey.tweets, I also get too many tweets. When I call coffee.tweets, I should get 4. The first 4. The tweets from coffee.dad. When I call jersey.tweets, I should get 2. This tweet and this tweet. The last 2 tweets, the ones that actually came from NJGov. What I need to do is to narrow down this list to just the tweets I'm looking for. I'm already in great shape. I've got an array, it's full of tweets. This is a great start. I'm just not done. I need an array of tweet instances that the user I called the method on, the tweets method on, created. Tweets created by the user who I called .tweets on. Jersey for jersey.tweets, coffeedad for coffeedad.tweets. I think that I can do this with an enumerable method. I think I can do this with one of the 4 methods that we worked with on day 2. And actually, I mean day 1. I should have done this poll during the break. Sorry, I didn't. Which method should we use? Save. All right, let's go to poll 3 and launch. Okay. Thank you for voting in this poll. I'm actually kind of encouraged to see that no one said each. I think it is possible to do this with an each, but it can be a little messy to do it with an each. But it is possible. I think if you answered each, that would be fine. I think there is a better solution, though, than each. Let's talk about map first. Can someone throw either in the chat or unmute themselves and just tell me what map does generally to an array? Mm-hmm. Yeah, it doesn't actually usually alter the original array unless you do map with an exclamation mark. But generally, I think you can say that map transforms an array of one thing into an array of other things. Follow-up question. If I have an array of 6 tweets and I called out map on it, how many tweets, how many things am I going to get back in the array that map returns? That is to say, when map transforms, can it also change the length of the array or no? Let's do this. If you think that map can change the length of the array, thumbs up. If you think that map cannot change the length of the array when you call it on it, thumbs down. And I'm going to look at your videos. Okay, seeing thumbs down, down, down. Keep them up, keep them up. I want to see everyone. Cool, thank you. Yeah, map can't change the length of this array. We want to change the length of this array. Map will transform an array of one thing into an array of other things, but it can't change the number of things that are in that array. We could change an array of tweets into just the messages. We could change the array of tweets into just the users who created those tweets, but we can't change the length of the array, and in this case, we want to. All right, I'm going to skip over select for a second, and I want to talk about find. Find is kind of like what we want to do here, but not quite, because of what find returns. Someone want to remind me what find returns, what data type? It kind of depends, but if you can sort of describe to me what the shape of the return value for find is, that would be helpful. An integer, one string. These are all possible answers. The important thing to know about find is the thing that it won't return most of the time. Find doesn't return an array. It returns one item in the array you're working with. So if we did tweet.all.find, the only thing that it would ever return is either a tweet or nil. Nil if it couldn't find a tweet in that array that matched the condition. Find is only going to return one item from the array. So the only way that find is going to return an array is if you were working with an array of arrays in the first place. We need an array of tweets. We've got an array of tweets. We need an array of tweets. Find can only return a tweet from this array or nil. So it's not a good fit for this, even though we've got a condition in find that's going to evaluate like whether or not a tweet fulfills that condition. And we do want to do that. Find is not our best option. Select is going to be our best option here. Select takes an array, looks at all the elements in the array, evaluates those elements based on a condition, and then returns the ones for whom that condition is true. So, this is our basic setup for select. I've called this tweet because as we iterate, this will be each one of the tweets in order of appearance. Since tweet.all is an array of tweets, this variable right here is going to represent each tweet in that array. The block is going to run multiple times. This code will run 6 times because there are 6 tweets. And each time, this block needs to return either true or false. If the block returns true every time, how many tweets will I get back? Does anyone know? Six. Why will we get 6 tweets if we return true in the block every time? Yeah, as many as there are in the array, generally speaking. Why do we get all 6 tweets if we just return true in this block? Each item in the array returns true. Select is looking for a true or false. If it sees true, it'll keep that tweet in the array it returns. If it sees false, it will not have that tweet in the array that it returns. So, if I change this to false and I say jersey.tweets.length, how many tweets should I get? Yeah, this is an empty array now. If we return false in the block for each tweet, we will discard each of them, and the array that we return will be empty. Neither of these is what we want to do. I'm just showing you these examples so we get a sense and refresh ourselves on how select works. What I want to do is figure out a way to write some code here that will sometimes return true, sometimes return false, depending on whether this is one of the tweets we're actually looking for. All right, so let's do this. I'm going to call it jersey.tweets. What I want to get back from here is an array of just these last 2 tweets that New Jersey posted. And what's going to happen when I run this code is we're going to jump to line 17 and get stuck on a binding pry. Here we are. Tweet.all.select do tweet, hit the binding pry. We're currently in the block for the first tweet. This tweet from Coffee Dad saying having coffee. So originally we called jersey.tweets. Is this one of the tweets that we want in the array that jersey.tweets returns? Is this tweet one of the tweets that we want in the array that jersey.tweets returns? See or no? Gary says no. Do we agree? All right, so this should be a situation where, okay, yeah, yes, Donnie agrees that we should not return this tweet. I guess that's a confusing question to answer. Um, so it might be good to sort of like start thinking about what kind of condition or what we could call on this tweet that would return true if this is a tweet we're looking for, like one of the New Jersey tweets, or false if this is not one of the tweets we're looking for. And I'm going to open up the tweet model just so you can sort of see what we can do on the tweet. On a tweet, we can call tweet.message and get back the string of the message that we set up on the initialize. We can call tweet.user and get back the actual user instance who created that tweet. We're still here on our binding pry in the select in the tweets method, but we can access these methods on a tweet because we have that tweet instance as a variable right here. All right. For now, though, I'm going to exit. I'm actually going to exit a couple times. Tweet. Now we're iterating over the tweet from Coffee Dad. They must pay for what they've done. We're like down here. Exit one more time. Still a tweet from Coffee Dad. Exit one more time. This one is the first tweet from NJ.gov. We're iterating through these in the same order they were created, because that's the order that they were shoveled into add@all. Add@all is our single source of truth, and it's the return value of our class method here. So at this point, we have our first tweet from NJ.gov. Is this one of the tweets that we want to return from Jersey.tweets? Should we return true in this block execution for our select? I agree. We should return true for this tweet. So how do we do that? What can we do with this tweet? What kind of comparison could we do with this tweet or some method of this tweet that would return true if this tweet is one of New Jersey government's tweets and false if it's one of Coffee Dad's tweets or anyone else's tweets in our app? Compare the tweet to the all array. So I think if we're going to compare one instance of a tweet to an array, we're always going to get false. We're going to go back to having that like empty array problem. I'm interested in this proposition here. So tweet.user is an instance of a user here. It's in fact, the user with the username njgov. Self, in this context, we're in an instance method on the user class. So self is going to be what? We're in an instance method on the user class. What can we expect self to be? We are in an instance method on line 17 of tweets. Sorry, on line 17 of user.rb. We're in the tweets instance method of the class user. What can we expect self to be if I print it out? If we don't know, that's fine, because I can just hit enter and we can find out. Yeah, it's not actually the user class, if that's what you meant. It is an instance of the user. And maybe that's what you meant too. If you did, you're right. This is, in fact, the instance of the user that we called tweets on in the first place. Remember, so long ago, we called. Oh, it's there somewhere. Here we go. Jersey.tweets. I just could have scrolled all the way up. Jersey.tweets. So, self is Jersey. If we call tweet.user equals self, we get true because tweet.user, the user who made this tweet, is the same exact user, same exact instance, same exact object ID as the user who is currently self, the user who we called this method on. And if we were to have a tweet from a different user, which we did before, if we have this tweet from Coffee Dad, tweet.user is going to be Coffee Dad. You can see that right here. Tweet.user is going to be CoffeeDad, and if we compare CoffeeDad to NJGov, we're going to get false. So if the block in our select returns the value of whether tweet.user is equal to the self user instance, we can get back the right tweets. By comparing the user of the tweet to the user who is self, our select can narrow down the list from all the tweets to just the tweets that are attached to that one user. So, this is not necessarily the easiest way to do this. I do think it's the best one, but yes, I can repeat. Fair enough. There's a lot going on here. I'm going to throw my binding pry back in here. So, here we are on our binding pry. Let's do this with Jersey this time. Jersey, as a variable, is an instance of a user. Created that instance here, and what I'm going to do in just a second is call jersey.tweets. So jersey.tweets is going to start with tweet.all. It's an array of tweets. Tweet.all.first is just one instance of a tweet. And like all tweets, I can call .user on that instance of a tweet and get back the user who created the tweet. Because I've got this user attr reader on a tweet, it'll give me the value of that @user instance variable. I can also do tweet.all.last.user. This will give me the user of the last tweet in the array, which happens to be njgov. Each one of these tweets has a .user method on it that I can call and get back the user who created that tweet. The reason that works is partly that reader, also the fact that when we created that tweet, we passed in the user who was creating it at that time. Can I run self? So here in this context, I'm on this binding pry on line 17 of runner.rb. Self is going to be something completely different than we've ever seen before. It's this object called main that is, in general, just not very useful, at least for our purposes right now. Where were you curious about the value of self? Okay, line 17 of user.rb. So in the actual select block. I'll get to that in just a sec. Yeah, actually, let's get to that now. I'm going to run coffeedad.tweets. So what happens is we run this method. We start with tweet.all, all 6 tweets. We start doing our select. Select is listening for a true or a false for each one of these tweets. And here we are on line 17. So we want to run self. Jack, what do you expect self to be? Wild guess if you want, or just tell me you don't know, and I'm not going to make you guess. All right, so it looks like you're thinking it might be an instance of a tweet or a user. Feel free to, yeah. It is going to be an instance. It's going to be an instance of a user. And the reason that it's an instance of a user is that the code we just ran was coffeedad.tweets. It's the user before the dot in coffeedad.tweets. If we call coffeedad.tweets, we're calling an instance method on that instance. We get into this instance method. Self is the instance that we called the method on. So, self is coffeedad. We're looking in this case for coffeedad's tweets, which is a really nice coincidence for us. We've got a tweet here, and this happens to be one of the tweets we're looking for. we want to make this expression here return true so that select can grab this tweet and put it in the array that it's going to return. If I run this code, magically, it's true, which is good. We want to tell select true for this particular tweet that we're iterating over. Tweet is our instance of the tweet. Tweet.user is coffee dad. Self is also coffee dad. So those two coffee dads equal each other, and it works. Tweet.self is not really a thing. Self is not the name of a method. It's just a keyword that kind of just works. The other thing that wouldn't work is tweet equals self. That will always be false, because tweet 100% of the time is going to be an instance of a tweet. Self 100% of the time is going to be an instance of a user, because we're in an instance method on the user class. We have to look at the tweet, call .user on it to get back to our instance of the user that we passed in when we created that tweet from right here, and compare those two in order to get back the right tweets. So this returns true for this iteration. Self always a prefix. Yeah, I think it's fair to say that. You can call methods on self depending on what self is. So in that case, it would be a prefix. It's never going to be a suffix. It's never going to be the name of a method you call on something else. I think it's more important, though, to think about what the value of self is, because in this case, it's an instance. In other cases, it's going to be a class. Okay, so let's exit, and we're going to loop around, and now we're looking at our next tweet. This is also a tweet from Coffee Dad, so if we look at tweet.user double equals self, that is still true. Exit, exit, exit. All right, tweet. This one is not a tweet from Coffee Dad. Tweet.user is njgov. Self is still Coffee Dad, because we're still in this tweets method, which is an instance method of the user. We're still in the process of calling coffeedad.tweets. This is not one of the tweets we are looking for. So what I'm hoping will happen is that when I compare tweet.user with self, that I will get false. I want to get false so that select will exclude this tweet from the list it returns. False is our way of telling select this is not the droid you're looking for. The tweet you're looking for non-Star Wars fans. And if I compare self, this instance of a user, with this other instance of a user, Ruby says no, these are not the same user, so I'm going to give you false. Comparing self, the user that we called .tweets on, with the user associated with the tweet, that's our best way of figuring out whether this tweet is one of the ones we're looking for. All right, I'm going to exit for real, and I want to show you a bad way of doing this before we close for today. If you don't have this 100%, that's okay. We've got more time. I just have to go run and talk to mod 2 in like 10 minutes. This may seem really complicated. This may seem like something you don't want to do. I think this is still the best way of doing it. This is kind of why we leaned into select early on. Here is what I think is a bad way of doing this, but one that might seem tempting. I could create an instance variable inside my user class, call it tweets, set it equal to an empty array when we initialize a new user. So Coffee Dad's going to have an array of tweets as an instance variable. Jersey could have an array of tweets as an instance variable as well. I could, as we create tweets with this post-tweet method, shovel those tweets into this array of tweets that exists for this particular user. So Coffee Dad's maintaining a list, Jersey's containing a list. When we call post tweet, we're going to shovel that tweet into that personal list of tweets. And then tweets gets really, really simple. I just return tweets. The only question is, does it work? Looks like it does. My question to you is, why might this not be a good approach? Why wouldn't I want to do this? Way less code. We don't have to think about self. But why wouldn't I want to do this? Storing the same data in multiple places. Interesting. Can you tell me more about that? Feel free to unmute yourself if you want to just talk about it. Flexibility. Yeah, I think that's fair too. Also, feel free to unmute if you want to talk about that. Oh, your mic is wonky. Okay. Pass what a message? The tweets method? Yeah, and we do. We have to pass the message in that we want to post, just like you have to type the message in the box when you're actually on Twitter. That's what we're doing right here. We're actually passing the message in each case. Because of dry. Yeah, I think this is maybe a similar thought to what we're saying here. If we have to add it all in another hash called @tweets array, I think you mean. But yeah, we're juggling two different arrays which overlap. We have two different sources of truth, and we want the source of truth to be singular. We want a single source of truth, similar to what we want with dry. We want a single source of truth about like what a method does. But when we have multiple sources of truth about which data we have, we run into similar but different problems. We have two different places to update our data. Let me give you an example. Let's say on our tweet class. Now let's do it on a user. Let's say we want a method we need to make a method where we just say, you know what, I made a tweet, it was bad, I regret it, I need to get rid of it. Yeah, we've got an array of tweets here, and we can call, I think, shift, I forget which array method is which every time. It might be pop, actually. Great, remove the last element of given array. So pop is an array method that will let you remove the last element from an array, and I think it'll return it. Let's just see if this works. Thank you, Gary. Thank you, Donnie. So let's say we are coffee dad and we're like, you know what, I'm not actually enjoying that cup of coffee anymore. A bug flew in it and I need to regret my last tweet. Cool. So this method returns the tweet that I regretted. And if I look at coffeedad.tweets, now I only have 3 tweets. Having coffee, drinking coffee, they must pay for what they have done. Great. Real Twitter does not put this much thought in. Yeah, no, you can't. I mean, you can actually delete a tweet, but you can edit one, which some people maybe should edit their tweets. All right. Twitter.all, tweets.all. If I look at tweet.all, though, a troubling thing is happening. If we're imagining this as like Coffee Dad's actual Twitter page, like we're good. We've only got the 3 non-regret filled tweets present. But in tweet.all, take a look at what is still there. Yes, dot pop removes the last element in an array. But dot pop only removes the last element from the array you call it on, not from the whole other array in the tweet class of all the tweets that exist. I've now given myself a really ugly problem. I have to pop the tweet out of this array, and I also have to then go and say like tweet.all.find the tweet that I want to remove, and yikes, no, no, no. 2 sources of truth is 1 source of truth too many. If I'm going to store tweets, the only place I should do it is in the tweet class. We're using this kind of add all pattern with an array, and we're shoveling tweets into it when they're created. We should let that be the single source of truth for which tweets exist and which tweets don't. If we were to delete from this source of truth, but still have a secondary source of truth over here, we still have the same problem of needing to delete in two places. So this should not be a secondary source of truth. Best thing to do is to consult our single source of truth in the tweet class, our tweet.all method that returns the array of all tweets, and to narrow that down to just the ones we're looking for. Twitter itself probably does something like this. We have one source, one array, one database table with all the tweets in it. And if we need to regret that tweet, we'll have to go back to that single source of truth to get rid of it as well. If we want to filter that down to just a user's tweets, that's the work that we're going to have to do. And that means we have to learn how to select and be really confident in our abilities there. If you're not there yet, there's still time. But I want you to focus on this approach, not the secondary source of truth one. Use select to filter your tweets rather than keeping around a whole other array of them that's going to need to be updated. I think real world Twitter uses a NoSQL database, if I'm not mistaken. I don't remember which one they use. Honestly, they may have multiple sources of truth because when you're as big as Twitter, it makes more sense to keep two around because it's faster in certain cases. But we are not there. We do not have real world Twitter problems right now. The approach I want you to use on the code challenge in your labs is this one. Yeah, that's actually a much more concise answer to that. Thank you, Sylvia. So the array somewhere with every single tweet that's ever been tweeted. God, that would be a big, big array. Maybe. I can't tell you. It's possible. And we will cover databases soon. I think for our purposes, comparing ourselves with the approach of Twitter is not all that helpful because Twitter has problems that I can't even imagine. The kind of scale of problems we're dealing with now are somewhat smaller than big, huge Twitter problems. And I think right now, paramount importance is having a single source of truth and understanding how that can get you out of corners that you can paint yourself into or code yourself into. All right, other questions? Yeah, they really are dealing with million-dollar problems. But you got to walk before you can run. All right, thank you all for your attention and your patience with this. Please, please, please let Sylvie and Ray know your questions in the next hour and a half while I'm with Mod 2. I'll be available this afternoon for any of those. And yeah, talk to you soon.